Welcome to the CXO and CHRO Walk into a Bar, where we share insights at the intersection of talent and revenue. Dive into a unique narrative with our hosts, Michelle Strasburger, the insightful CHRO, and Dominique Sanfleur, the visionary CXO. Together, they bring dynamic perspectives that ignite thought-provoking dialogue from the C-suite. Each week, join us for electrifying sessions that confront the very challenges modern CXOs navigate in today's fast-paced business landscape. When split-second decisions loom, must it be talent or revenue that takes the hit? Or is there a harmonious crossroad where both can thrive? Can we blur the lines between talent and revenue? In every episode, we provide executive leaders with 3 strategic takeaways, transformative insights that will propel you to master the delicate balance between people and profit. It's not about winners or losers, but crafting an environment where everyone triumphs. Tune in and step closer to redefining executive success.
Hey, hey,
Hey, hey, here we are.
here we are indeed.
Thursday already.
It is Thursday already. You're hailing in from Vermont.
From Vermont today. The last little corner of Vermont in Burke, Vermont.
Ah, okay. Nice. Um, well, as usual, I think our topics, I'm always excited about our topics, and I think this is another great topic, very relevant topic, especially for the times that we're in. But Michelle, please properly introduce us, and we'll get diving into it.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm excited to be here. I'm Michelle Strasburger. I'm the CEO of HR Rebooted, where we work with CEOs of fast-growing companies to help them create intentional cultures to help them scale as they grow.
Awesome. And I'm Dominique St. Fleur, CEO of Intramark. We create a data layer on culture to enable leaders to anticipate and get ahead of hidden risks like productivity gaps and unwanted turnover.
And today we're talking about cost-effective benefits. We've been talking about, a couple weeks ago, we talked about headwinds and the organizations are facing. And I've been talking a lot about, I've been talking a lot with people in my industry and networking. And a lot of people are saying organizations are holding back on spending and things are slow for people in the consulting world because of that. And people are hesitant to spend and hesitant to make decisions and because they're unsure of what the future is going to bring. And I think organizations are feeling that and just not wanting to spend money on extra things like benefits, but they still want to keep their employees engaged. So how do they do that? How do they balance that? And so that's really what the conversation is today. How do we keep everybody engaged without spending extra money on benefits? Or are there low cost things you can do to keep your team engaged?
Absolutely.
And we have a bunch of ideas.
Sorry?
And we have a bunch of ideas.
We do. I think before diving into, because I'm already super excited, and before diving into, we got to do 2 things. One, what level of a conversation is this? Is this relaxing mojito on the beach, or is this like this is a super stressful type level of a conversation? What do you think, given the environment, the nature of this?
Hot here in the Northeast, hot, hotter, I think, than Florida, where you are. It's been over 100. So I'm going mojito, refreshing, cold, minty mojito.
Well, I'm gonna match that energy. I can't believe it's that hot where you're at. That's really rare, but okay. I'm gonna match that energy. And to that, one thing that we should definitely frame the conversation with is we have a ton of ideas, right? Low cost ways of for employee benefits to keep them engaged, especially in the competitive and environment like we're in. But none of this works, or none of this is going to be effective if some basics are not first taken care of, right? So if culture is not at a good place in general, or some other table stake items, right? So these are not solutions to fixing culture. These are more things to, once culture is at a decent place, the privilege that an organization has is to really start to throw in nimble items to tweak, to make tweaks, that are cost effective and efficient to keep culture going, growing, especially in competitive environments. But Michelle, anything that you wanted to throw on top of that before we jump into these cool ideas?
I think also that employees are working harder. We're probably not hiring as much right now. And so I think it's an important time to recognize that. And I think employees are nervous. And so that state of feeling unsure at the executive level is not just felt at the executive level. And so employees are feeling, so if you're feeling it at the executive level, employees are feeling it as well. And so these things aren't just nice to have, they're things that can help reinforce a sense of belonging and a sense of like, okay, I feel a little bit more sure in a time where it's not sure.
I think that's very, very well put, Michelle. Like, these are things that you throw in when you're really faced with challenging environments. These are really good options to have to have that sense of reassurance. I think that's a really valuable comment there, because it's, you never know what the world's going to throw at you. You never know where the economy is going to go, and having things that you can do to continuously reassure, your people, that you have their back, as soft reminders, I think are always a great option. And we'll go through a few interesting ideas that I think, again, low cost, right? We don't need to throw a ton of budget at this. And usually, so, the right solutions to problems doesn't really involve a lot of budget. It's just really thinking about, what do people want at this time, right? Is that reassurance? Is that knowledge that leadership is thinking about me as we're going through these tough times, these unsure times. So with that, Michelle, did you want to kick us off with our first idea?
Sure. And we've prioritized them, at least we've each prioritized them in order of what we thought was more bang for your buck. And so one of the ones that I think rise to the top of my ideal list, or some of the things I've experienced in the past, was time with the CEO. And so one of the things we've done in my past life was a breakfast with the CEO. Doesn't have to be breakfast, but it could be a round table with the CEO. And so what we did was, once a month, the CEO and I would sit down with a group of employees. And so we would invite about 10 to 12 employees. We would volunteer them. So we would send out an email and say, you've been selected this month to meet with the CEO. And so they had to show up because they were invited. And their managers would be notified that they would have this meeting with the CEO. So they had to skip out of whatever else they were doing. And we would bring in breakfast, because it was a morning meeting at 9 a.m. And they would sit there, and the rules of engagement were, you can ask the CEO anything, or you can ask me anything. And we would be transparent. And anything that the CEO or I shared with the group could then be shared out to the rest of their team. But anything anybody else shared within the group had to stay within the group. So if somebody shared, like, I'm sick and I have to take time off, that could then not be shared outside of the group, to keep confidentiality and the respect of others in the team. And it was a great time for people to connect with the CEO and see that he was actually human. And it was another opportunity for the CEO to have their ear to the ground and get feedback and ideas and suggestions. And we were building software at the time and kind of rebuilding software. And so the CEO got this got great feedback of like, why aren't we doing it this way? Or why didn't we think about this? And so it was a great opportunity for him to hear feedback and ideas and suggestions that he might not otherwise have heard. And it was an opportunity for people to like just share ideas and thoughts or ask questions that they might not have had the opportunity to share in a much smaller group, that they wouldn't raise their hand in a town hall and ask, or walk up to the CEO and ask, because the CEO seat seems so far away for people.
What a great option, right? And again, it costs nothing. Of course, it costs, time, but it's time very, very well spent. And I think the ROI is huge, right? Because word's going to get out that, not everybody's going to be able to have time with the CEO within a year, potentially. But knowing that this program's going and people having the flexibility to share out what's being said in these rooms is super valuable. But just the gesture and just the opportunity to meet with the CEO, ask questions, and all of that comes with it. I think where my mind goes, it buys a lot of the word that I'm looking for kind of escapes me. It buys goodwill. It buys quite a bit of goodwill with the entire workforce, even though you're not meeting with the entire workforce. So I think that's super special.
It removes the CEO from the ivory tower. You and I talked about the undercover boss, right? Like, it removes that undercover boss, right? It makes them seem human. It gets them. We did the same thing in the plants. We did this program in the plants. So then the person packing the boxes or picking the products actually got to see the CEO and the CHRO and spend time with them and ask questions and say, why aren't we doing this in the plant? Why is this important? And why are you measuring us on numbers? And, and ask these questions and, get to understand the why behind things and know that like they're not just these people in corporate that are setting rules, and actually know they're human.
And one term that I've heard thrown around quite a bit, less so recently, but just more so in the past, was servant leadership, right? It was kind of a popular thing to say for a period of time a few years ago. But I think that's a great example of servant leadership, right? It's, not just sitting on a stage at a town hall and talking to a big crowd, right? It's more getting people in smaller groups, allowing them to be heard and share ideas. And I think that's a really great way for a senior leader to show and exude that servant leadership attitude. And again, it just buys a ton of great, goodwill. On top of that, the benefits, right? The benefits of showing that and the ideas that come from it, being able to, what I like to say, listen at the edges, I think is a great, option to do that. So that's a really good one.
Yeah. And it feeds the intrinsic motivation, right? There's the intrinsic motivators versus the extrinsic motivators. The intrinsic motivators last longer. I remember when I was first out of college and I started my first job and I was an executive assistant and I got in the elevator. I worked for Iron Mountain and it was a big Fortune 500. And I was just this executive assistant. I had moved from the benefits call center to this other role. And I got in the elevator and the CEO was in there and I was like, oh, and I just stood there and he said, "Hi, Michelle, how's your day?" And I was like, he knows my name. And for the whole week, I felt like I was seen. I was like, cool. He knew my name. And it just went so far. And I just was all excited. And that like intrinsic value was so important for me that I was just, I was excited to go to work because the CEO knew my name of a Fortune 500 company.
And those small investments last a lot longer than, just throwing a ton of, just throwing dollars at the problem, right? Right. It's people remember how they feel in certain situations more than anything else. And so I think that's, again, a great option, just showing that human side, that level of access, empathy, and relatability, you're hitting on the head.
Mm-hmm.
hitting it on the head.
Yep. So what's your idea, Dom?
I going after that one, I might have to scrap all my ideas here. I think that one was a really good one. But I think, based on my experience when I was working at another, at a company, we were working on this pretty cool but very demanding project, and it really, demanded a lot of time from weekends, professional services, right? The typical story there. And when the client calls it, but it was a really cool project, really cool team. And we were really, working really hard. And the partner, just, he came into the conference room where we're all huddled up, just getting work done. And he just gave us a spot bonus. And I forget if it was like a gift card, or I think it was like $50 in cash or something like that. It was just like really informal. And he said, this is not much, but I just wanted to say thank you. And so to this day, I remember that, right? Of all the, that was my first job out of college. And I remember that to this day. I've had multiple roles after that, and so on and so forth. But it's those moments that show, and it wasn't about the money, of course, it wasn't much, especially in New York. But it was just, the gesture of saying, I recognize that you're working hard, and just wanted to say thank you. And here's the way that I like to say thank you, right? Here's just a nice card, or, or just like $50 with it, or a gift card, wherever the case may be. Again, not a huge investment in dollars, but what you're looking for is that recognition, that visibility, that acknowledgement. And, it again, what makes employees loyal, and really willing to put in even more effort, are those moments of recognition. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to wait at the end of the year bonus to, try and recognize employees, because that, often that you want to keep it as close as possible to the actual event. And so once that team's working hard, or in the midst of going through, a tough transition or whatever it is, you want to use that moment to deliver something. And it doesn't have to be much. And so it's something that stuck out to me. Spot bonuses, they don't have to be formal. They don't have to be at the end of the year. It's just, something small and modest, but it's more about the thank you than it is about the money. But that's something that stood out to me quite a bit.
I think that's great. I think being able to say, especially when it's not expected, and you catch somebody off guard and saying, I see you, I recognize the work you're doing, and you hear, take your partner out to dinner, or, go take a day off. I've seen you working on the weekends. Take Friday off and have some downtime. It doesn't have to cost you money, but just recognizing that extra effort somebody's been putting in, or you close that deal. I saw you working hard to close that deal. I know you've been putting in the extra time and doing the extra research to get to know the person, and whatever. And I think it's really important. We use predictive index, which is a behavioral assessment. It tells us people's work-related behaviors and their motivating needs. And some people like to be recognized publicly, and some people like to be recognized privately. So sometimes, if they like to be recognized privately, it can be as simple as an email, and it gets them very excited. Like, hey, you can send an email, maybe copy the CEO, or copy their boss or their coworkers, like, hey, you did a great job on this. And some people like to be put on stage, or done publicly in the room, like stand up in the room and let's applaud so and so. So if you can recognize them in a way that hits their motivating needs, it goes even further. But But I think that's huge. And it, again, doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be monetary. It can be in a way that just fills their bucket. And it can go a long way.
And there are two things that you said there, and I also want to get to your story, Michelle, about the personalized thank you note, because I think that's another great example of just hitting it on the spot, right? You want to recognize, you want to do something like that, very close to the event. But I think you said two things that were super important. One, it's when it's not expected, right, and in the moment or close to the moment that makes it special. Right, that really brings the significance out of it, that memorability out of it. Is I wasn't expecting the spot bonus. I just kind of walked in and said, "Thank you." Right, wasn't expecting it. It wasn't normal. Again, it's a spot bonus. It's not traditional, but it's that unexpected, thing with it. That unexpected appreciation. I think that there's something about that psychologically. Mm-hmm. That's there. But I also think what you mentioned as well is learning how people on your team likes to be recognized, right? Some may not like it public, some may like recognition private, and I think that's super important that you mentioned. But Michelle, I'd love, this is kind of related to the spot bonus, but it's that spot recognition. You had a great story that I think was that hit it on the spot. When it comes to recognition, something that we can all learn from.
This wasn't even my idea. So my definition of culture is the behaviors of your leadership, right? The behaviors you tolerate and the behaviors you celebrate. So during the pandemic, we were all working remotely. Most of us were working remotely. And there was another woman on the executive team with me, and she and I kind of got each other through it. And so we were talking one day and complaining about how hard it was to be a mom and have kids at home trying to do remote learning. And we were working in a business that we had people in plants working full time. We were trying to keep them safe. And we were growing very quickly because we were a business that was growing, fortunately, during the pandemic. And so we were talking about that. So we were working a lot of hours and trying to balance children. And she had more children than I did. And she came up with this idea, and we did it. And we sent letters to all the parents at home, all the employees that were parents of young children. And it just basically was a card, and it said, "We get it. We're doing the same thing. We know it's hard." And from the letters, like, people were like, "Wow, thank you." Like, we feel heard. It was the same thing with like the CEO. Like, we feel heard. We feel like we get it. We're not alone. And I think understanding where your employees are and being able to meet them where they are. And like I said before, like, this is a time where people feel unsure. And so being able to be like, yeah, it's hard, and being able as a leader to say, I'm unsure too, and being authentic is really important. And it doesn't cost you anything. Like, it's scary as a leader because I think we're supposed to be the leader. We're supposed to be strong, and we're supposed to be like, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's fine. Everything's great. But it's okay to be authentic. It's okay to say, I've struggled, right? I'm unsure. The future is unsure, but we're going to get through this together. And this is, what we're dealing with, and we're going to deal with this together. And I think that moment helped people stay with the organization, because it was a time where people could have left because they were deciding, like, I have kids at home. I don't have daycare. I don't have school, but I have to work. And so it's like, do I leave my work to focus on my kids? Or do I do something different? And so people decided to stay with the organization because they felt like we cared about them.
Yeah. And, thanks so much for sharing that. And you mentioned something earlier in this call, right? It's, if you as a leader are feeling it, right, whatever the unsure, insecurity, whatever it may be, right, around the corporate environment, if you're feeling it there are other humans too, right? They're probably feeling it too.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great signal to, again, not hide it, not put that mask on, which leaders, it's a human reaction, right? You want to keep it together. You want to come off as if you have all the answers and you're, this bedrock. And part of being a bedrock is acknowledging your reality, because it is often a shared reality, right? And so how a lot of employees aren't in the position to feel like a leader would stereotypically feel, right? In control, and it could be chaos out there, but we've got a plan, and we know that's dispelling with that and relating with other people who are, in the same, boat as you are. I think that was a great call and a great opportunity to acknowledge, other people that were feeling it too. And so I think it's a great story.
And it didn't cost us anything. I mean, it cost us, she got the cards printed and then she signed them and mailed them to me, and I had to sign them, and then we mailed them out. So it cost us a little bit in postage, but it didn't really cost us anything but time. And but the response and the return on investment was huge. So it was a pretty big impact. So taking a little bit of time and, to lean into your people has a huge return on investment.
And there's an example that I can go into, it's just kind of tangential to this, but I think it's worth really doubling down on that comment, right? The ROI there is tremendous, and it really doesn't cost much. And the conception that, there has to be some big effort, some big thing, a lot of the times when it comes to culture, based on what I've seen, it's tweaks here and there. It's recognition here and there, or just acknowledgement. It's just something that's not being done that a leader can do, or leaders can do more consistently. And so developing a culture where leaders look or are proactive and diligent about looking for opportunities to relate, and also looking for opportunities to, acknowledge and recognize other people, that alone can really counterbalance a lot of, other negative aspects of a culture, right? If you could get that right, that's gonna do a lot to move the needle, as you're figuring other things out within the culture. And so really that's an aspect that it's just a mindset. Mindset's hard to change sometimes, but if leaders are intentional about looking for opportunities to relate with people, and recognize people, and kind of get that in their flow, that could do a lot at scale to move things quite a bit in the culture.
I was just going to say that you have to be intentional about it, because sometimes we move so fast that it's not easy to get that. And that's, one of the things you say a lot that I love to hear, and I remind myself, is you have to listen at the fringes, right? You have to listen at the edges to get some of that. And you have to ask the questions of, like, what did we do today that should be celebrated? What do we have to remind ourselves of that has to be lifted up? Who went above and beyond? And sometimes in today's world, because we do more with less, the expectation, like to get a 3, right? The meets expectations is to go above and beyond. And so everybody's already going above and beyond every day. And so, the bar is already higher. So, we have to recognize that already and give people a break and recognize that people are already going above and beyond.
And even taking the opportunity, I think is even the harder part of that as well is recognition, even with low performers, right? And acknowledging, like, hey, you're not meeting the bar, but I see the effort, I see, the striving, and using some opportunities to, again, spot thank yous and spot bonuses, even at the pool of people. This is not exclusively for your high performers, right? This is for everybody. Right. And so also keeping in mind that this is also for people who may be struggling performance-wise within an environment, because what you want to do, right, is encourage as much as possible a turnaround in that situation, and especially people that are kind of struggling, not only with the work itself, but with the environment on top of that. That recognition, that effort there is going to matter quite a bit because, yeah, this is something that's for everybody. Just
Yeah, I think one of the other ideas we had too was a like a learning budget or a learning stipend, and that could be for somebody too. Maybe they're not where they need to be, and so maybe there's a learning stipend so they can learn a different technology or they can learn a different skill set. There's a lot, especially with AI. There's an opportunity to upskill or reskill people because AI may take some of the job that they don't like or they're not good at away from them. And so we can upskill or reskill them into something else. And so we can do some learning stipends to give them that opportunity to step into something different and really kind of reframe what they're doing.
That I like that one quite a bit. It's killing two birds with one stone, right? It's one, I recognize your development as a person, as a professional, and also it benefits the organization. And so I think that's a great one where we think about, yes, that's probably going to be a little bit more on the dollar investment side. But again, what we want to keep in mind here is what's the ROI relative to dollars spent. I think that one goes quite a bit, right? If you can invest in additional learning for an employee for them to learn how to be, more proficient, efficient, knowledgeable, increase their depth, or help their turnaround in a specific role. That alone, that small investment, not only goes a long way from an appreciation and loyalty perspective, because it says that the organization is willing to do more to invest in me, but it also goes a long way, and as that employee's taking advantage of those resources to help the situation along.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We could go on and on. There's lots of options.
We have quite a bit of list.
I think one thing that needs to be true in all of this is that it needs to align with your culture, and your culture has to be your culture has to be in the right place first. You can't have a messy culture and then try to do some of these things because you're just going to get eye rolls. So you have to have a good culture that has a culture of trust, a culture of feedback, a culture of respect and recognition before you start to put some of these things in place. Because if you just start doing this, they're going to be like, what's going on? Yep. They're not going to trust it. So, make sure that you've got an intentional culture in place before you start moving forward with some of these initiatives. I think some of these initiatives will then reinforce that culture and make sure that whatever you're doing will align with your culture so that it does reinforce the culture.
I think again, that's a point that can't be emphasized enough, right? Having great culture in place allows for other opportunities to drive ROI in a way that you're not going to have those options otherwise, right? And I think that's hitting it on the head.
Mm-hmm. So great.
That's awesome.
We have so many more ideas, but we are out of time. These half hours go by so fast.
They do too fast.
So thank you, everyone. We will see you next week.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy Vermont.
Thank you. Thank you, Neha.
Oh, hey, Neha. Thank you.
You've just experienced another episode of The CXO and CHRO Walk into a Bar, where we share insights at the intersection of talent and revenue. Thank you for joining us. Please join us next week at noon Eastern for more strategic content to help you scale your business. You can follow us on LinkedIn and on YouTube for additional content or episodes you may have missed. The links will be in the comments section. If you'd like more information or to schedule time with Michelle or Dominique, follow the link in the comments section to book time on their calendar. Until next week, cheers.